Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll Masech the Zevachim daf Kuf Aleph. We are going to begin on Kuf Aleph Amud Aleph, second line from the top, Tanu Rabbanan. So we have a few psukim that we're going to be quoting. Kichein Sivesi says Torah or Hashalim. The pasuk says Vidava Moshe el Aaron. So Moshe spoke to Aaron, to Elazar, to Tamar, the children who were left over, because none of an Avihu had since died. Kachuas a mincha, hanoiseres, go and take the mincha which is left over, Miyishi Hashem, the yechlua matzos etzel mizbech, and you should go and eat it. Ki kadosh kadashim hi, yechaltam oise b'makam kadosh, eat it in the makam kadosh in the azara. Ki chaka b'chak banecha hi, Miyishi Hashem kichein tsuvesi, that you should still eat from this carbon. And then the pasuk says, Kasher Sivesi, in which is also in Vayikra Yud, a couple psukim later, Heilu Huvas Dama El Kodesh Penima. We didn't bring the blood into the inner Kodesh. Achol Toichel Subekodesh Kasher Sivesi. You should have eaten the carbon. Moshe's complaining, why did you eat the carbon? It shouldn't have been burned. Why'd you eat it? And again, here we're talking about a case of a ninos, as we were talking about in yesterday's daf. And then kasher tziva Hashem. We have a third pasuk, which is also in Vayikra Yud, which is in between those first two psukim. The eis chazia tenufa v'yeshaika truma toichu. So the sacrificial parts, the parts of the animal, you the kohen should eat, but makam tahar, atov banecha v'nosecha itach, ki chak v'chak banecha, ninu mezivchi shalmi b'nei Yisrael, shaika truma v'chazet tenufa al ishe ha'chalavim yavi, v'hanif tenufa b'nei Hashem, v'oyel chalav banecha idchal chak oylam, kasher tziva Hashem. So Moshe keeps saying, Hashem told me to tell you that this is what you're supposed to do. This is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to eat it. You're supposed to eat it. You're not supposed to burn it. It says it 3 times. Now, what exactly is going on over here? Why do we have this 3 times? Now, before we go even further, when it says Kasher Sivesi, which is the second pasuk, says Rashi, B'chatas de Rosh Chodesh. We're talking about the carbon of Rosh Chodesh, which is a chatos, shenisrafa, that it was burned. Ksiv hein luhuvas dama, etc. So instead of eating this carbon, which is the typical situation of the chatos, the kohen can eat part of it. To Rosh Chodesh, this was the typical regular carbon. So he was wondering why it was burned and not eaten. Okay, so kichein sivesi, the first pasuk, bianinas yachua, is basically saying that even you are an oine, because none of you had died, you still should eat the carbon. Kasher sivesi, like I commanded regarding the Chatas or Rosh Chodesh, B'shas Maisa Oimrohen. It was at the actual time, says Rashi, Kishiyiru Lehen Ani Nosun, when they became an Oinen, right after Nadab Avihu's death, Armol Moshe said, Shlo Yimnu Me'achilos Kachim Hayoim, that you should not stop eating the kachim. Sheshamam Pigvor, because I heard from Hashem, Shechol Kaninus Hayoim Bekachim Mishar Yomim. Ukshira Shenisrafa. When Moshe saw that it was actually burned, Armulhen Achol Toichlo, so you're supposed to eat it. Hayulachem La'oichla. Kasher Sevisi Eschem B'Shas Maisa. You were supposed to eat it, not burn it. So I have to understand why they burnt it. We're going to get to that soon. So Kasher Sevisi B'Shas Maisa Armulhen. Kasher Siva Hashem, which is the third pasuk. Lo miolaya ni oimer. It's not me. I didn't make this up. Moshe is saying that you should eat it even though you're an oinen. I heard it from Hashem. Terminhi nemnei aninus nisrafa lakach nemer ke'ele. Says Rashi, umatzinu shahaydu Moshe. We find that Moshe agreed to the fact, after the fact, that the Sir Rosh Chodesh was burned, even though he thought originally it should have been eaten, but for some reason Moshe ended up saying, oh yeah, you're right. As the pasuk says, Vayita be'enav, he ended up accepting their psak, if you will, of having it burned and not eaten. Now, shama heter aninus l'boba yoyim l'omohida. This whole thing doesn't make any sense. What does it mean, Vayita be'enav, that Moshe was okay with it, if in fact he was told, which he was, Mepia Gvura, that they could eat it even as an einain. So then why was he happy and satisfied with the fact that after some type of give and take, which we'll see what the conversation was between Moshe and his brother Aaron, that eventually he felt that, okay, you're right, the Sirush Chodesh should have been burned. So Shmuel Kasha. Ha, Rabbi Yehuda, ha, Rav Nachman, Asanya. Yebnei Aninos Sarfua. The truth is, the reason why it was burned is because he was an einain. What are you talking about? I thought that taka, you're supposed to be able, an einain could eat. In this particular situation, Aaron was allowed to eat. So that is only referring to the special karbanos, but these are the regular karbanos, the typical carbon of Sirosh Chodesh, that we would not have made an exception. Actually, he does not hold that we're saying that an einain is allowed to eat it. No. That is not the case. Ke'ela. That's the reason why it says Ke'ela. Divri Reb Nechemia. So Reb Nechemia said the reason why they did not eat the Sirush Chodesh is because they were an einain, and einain was not allowed to eat from the Sirush Chodesh. The truth is that, as Rashi says, Shenagaba Tumas Tumba B'chatas Shel Sirush Chodesh Shekarva Bo B'yoyim. So the truth is, this is all Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the day of Hukam Mishkan, and for whatever reason, this carbon ended up becoming tameh. So you're right. Really, I hold an einain would be able to eat it, but because the Sirush Chodesh became tameh, so therefore it was not allowed to be eaten. She'im ata oimer minei aninos nisrafa sahavil shloshtin shiisrafu. There's three different karbanos over here, which we're going to see in Rashi in a second, that if in fact an einain is not allowed to eat it, it has to burn, so why did they only burn the Sirush Chodesh? Based on that logic, you would think you have to burn all of them. Says Rashi, B'shleisha Seirim, what were these three Seirim that were makriv on that day of Rosh Chodesh Nisan? One was the Seir Nachshain, which was the special Seir which was designated by that particular Shevet, which that in itself was a special carbon. The Sirush Chodesh, which is not unique, is done all the time. The Seir Shabbat L'Shah. And there was also a seir that was brought for that time. Out of all three, the only one which was burned was the Sirush Chodesh, not the other one. But the question is, why not? If an einain is not allowed to eat, so then he should have burned all of them. Okay, so obviously the problem wasn't that he was an einain because the other ones were not burned. It must be because there was a tumah issue specifically with the Sirush Chodesh, and that's the reason why they had to burn only that one. Davar acher, hayiroyul oichlan le'erev. The truth is, during the day as an einain, he's not allowed to eat it. He was allowed to eat it that night, and therefore, what ended up happening? They were allowed to eat it not now, but at night. And in the interim, they were hoping to be able to eat it that night, but it became tameh in the interim, and therefore that's the reason why it had to be burned. So now we have just a stam kasha. Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aharon a Kohen, right? So Pinchas, right? He was shelo haya einain. He was not an einain, right? He's like the grandkid of Pinchas, right? So why wasn't he allowed to eat it? He was a kohen, right? Pinchas ben Elazar a kohen. So why wouldn't he be allowed to also eat from this carbon? So what was the whole problem? If it was an issue of an einain can't eat it, so then you can give it to someone else who's not an einain. So Rabbi Omer idi Reb Nechemia v'loi kasha. Really, it's like the sheet of Reb Nechemia. Reb Nechemia said it's totally on mipnei tuma nisrafa, because he holds that. One second. Pardon me. Reb Nechemia said mipnei aninus, because he holds that einain cannot eat. So how do we understand all that? Seems like there's a lot of good kashas over here. Should have burned them all. So it's not a kasha. Kan b'kachi shad, kan b'kachi daitis. So it comes to kachi shah, so that was allowed to be eaten. The kachi dairais, that is what he said was not allowed to be eaten, which is which is something which is all the time, which is the sirash chaydish. Says Rashi, avol sir shorish chaydish, kachi daris hain, right? Umoishe kishakatsav ta kasaver kivan shishmati heter aninos b'mincha hu adin l'chatas. He thought that just like you could eat as an onion, these other things, you go see the chatas. So when it comes to the kachi dairais, which was the seir rosh chodesh, so there an onion cannot eat. Rav Nechemia hachimataretz lahani kroi. And Rav Nechemia, this is how he answers those psukim. And again, he says this all totally that the reason why the seir rosh chodesh could not be eaten was because an onion cannot eat, even though they could have eaten the kachi shah, which they did, but not the kachi dairis, the sirash chaydish. And Nechemi hachmitar, so hachi kra, that's how he enters. The Rabbanan hechi matartzi lahu lahai krai. How do they understand it? So Nechemi matartzi lahachi madua lachaltem. Moshe says, why did you not eat it? Why did you burn the carbon? So Amalo Moshe Aaron. So Moshe is saying Shem nichnas dam lefnai lefnim. Maybe the reason there was some problem with the sirash chaydish, such as you brought it lefnai lefnim into the kodesh kadashim, which would passel it. So Amalo henu huva as dama. No, I didn't do that. So then Moshe said, well, shema chutzl mechitzase etzasa. Maybe you brought it outside of the azara, and that's why. So Amalo, no, hektish haisa. B'kodesh haisa will always remain in the azara, so that wasn't a problem. So the dilma b'aninos ekravusa upasal tuha. Maybe the reason why is because you're an oinain. B'aninos, it was you were makravit, and it was apostle. Says Rashi, Shem nichnas damoy lefnim. Right, this is what Moshe said. Become apostle. Mitchuvaso atalama shekach aimer lehem metchila medikarma henu huva penimo. Must be that was what Moshe said before. Okay. So Amrulei henu huva as dama. That so Amrulei Moshe v'chi heim hekrivu. Was it? Do you think it was a kohen hedjit that was makravit, and therefore that would postle it? Ani hikravti. I, Aaron, the Kohen Gadol, am the one who was makravit, and I had the right to be able to do it. And Oinain, as a Kohen Gadol, was allowed to be makrav karbanos, as we saw in the Mishnah at the beginning of this parak. The Yermalei, Heiluhuvu as Dama. So he said, as an Oinain, again, I could bring. Again, it wasn't brought with Nalifnim. V'kaidish Haisa, it wasn't brought out of the Azara. Achol Toichu Haisa Kasher Sivesi. So he should have eaten it, just like you, Aaron, were able to be makriv this sirash chaydish, even though it was you're an oinain, so you should be able to eat it too. Why'd you burn it? So Amalo, the tikrena oisi ke'ela, yochalti chatas hayoim hayita b'nei Hashem. So he said that when it comes to the karbanos, which are things which are used typically, so only that that on a special occasion that was able to be eaten. However, I cannot eat from the chatas hayoim of the shel rosh chaydish, and therefore I had to burn it. So I ate the b'nei Hashem. So that was something which he was satisfied with the answer. So Shema u'shemata el b'kachi shah. She said, after all, maybe only when it comes to the maluyim, which is the sir nachshain, that was not to be eaten. Dibikachi dairis of the sirash chaydish, maybe not. Kavachamer mamaiser hakal, that we know that mam maiser hakal amratayra lo achalti ba'oini mimenu. You're not even allowed to eat maiser while you're in oinain. So b'kodesh dairis l'koshikain. So karbanos certainly shouldn't be able to. So we only made an exception dafka about these specific karbanos for the maluyim, but not for sirash chaydish. That had to be burned. So miyad yishma Moshe v'ita be'enav hoida. He admitted to it. Boish Moshe, he wasn't embarrassed. Lo shemati, el omer shemati v'shachachti. He said, "Taki, you're right. I did hear that exactly as you said. I just forgot the back and forth like we just went through." Okay. Fine. Rabbi Huda and Rav Shimon Heichem Tartzilhu. So how do they answer this? Hachem Tartzilhu. Madua lachaltem esachatas b'makam hakodesh. Why Moshe says to Aaron, did you not eat the chatas, the seir rosh chodesh in the makam kadosh? Shemen nechnas dama of nalefnim. Maybe you brought it inside the Kodesh Kodashim. So Melo Hein Lo Huvu as Dama. I didn't do that. El Kodesh Panim Shema Chutzlam Umechitzasi Yatzasa. So again, as you said, maybe Moshe said, well, maybe you brought it outside of the Azar Melo Hein B'Kodesh Haisa. No, I never did that. It was in the proper place. V'Dilma Ba'Ninas Akravtihu V'Upasal Tuha. That maybe again someone who was an Oinin who was not allowed to be Makrav it apostled it. So Melo Moshe Hein Hikrivua. The apostle behu aninos ani hakravti. I am the Kohen Gadol, and I was the one who was actually makravit, and I was allowed to, even though I wasn't oini. But dilma agav meraichu pashatuba. Maybe due to the bitterness of the fact that you just lost your two children, you made a mistake, you were negligent. And somehow you made the Sir Rosh Chodesh tameh. So maybe that's the reason why. It's not because the Sir Rosh Chodesh is something you're not allowed to eat. You were makar of it. Maybe it was because you didn't realize you made a tameh. So Malil Moshe, kachni meinecha shanim mavazi kachi shemayim. You really think I'm going to be mavazi kachi shemayim, that I'm going to make it tameh? V'tikrenu oisi ka'ela. I was extremely careful. There's no way I would have made such a mistake. So I would not have made a tameh. So Amalo, the Hain, if that's the case, so if that's the case, it wasn't tameh, it wasn't brought in the outside the zar or ilaf na'ilafnim, and you are the one that was makravit, so then you should be able to eat it too. So maybe the only time you're allowed to do this is only at night. As an oinin, maybe an oinin during the day, because it's so strict, you're not allowed to eat it during the day. So maybe that's what it's saying. You're not allowed to eat it during the day. You have to wait until the nighttime, and then in the interim it became tameh. So miyad v'yishma Moshe, as we continue kuf album days v'yita beinav loy boish. Moshe, he wasn't embarrassed. Loimer loy shemati el shemati v'shachachti. Fine. See, Taka heard it and he just forgot it before. Okay, so iboilahu. So we have a kasha now on this. I understand, why did he just wait and then eat it at night? So as we said, because tuma b'oinis bata, which I kind of alluded to before, is that it became tameh, and therefore since the Sir Rosh Chodesh became tameh, so you couldn't wait. You're right. Technically, you could have waited until the night, according to this, and then he could have eaten it. It's just during the day that he can't eat. He can be makar of it as a kohen gadol, even though he's an oinin, but not eat it until that night. But in the interim, the Sir Rosh Chodesh became tameh, so it had to be burned. Now, Bishlam Rabbanan had to say hayoim, so it makes a distinction between today and tomorrow. Elram nechemi my hayom. What does that mean? So chayvas hayoim. It just means the chayvas hayoim of the various karbanos. Bishlam Rab Nechemiah had to say hein hayoim el Rabbanan my hein hayoim chachli kamer hein hikrivu ani hikravti. So he said that in fact I was the one who was makravit. Says Rashi, my hayoim chayvas hayoim kolomer kachi daris shin chayvas hayoim. It's just referring to the karbanos, which are chayv of yom, which is the Sir Rosh Chodesh. And we have the other kasha, halchi karmelei amra dilma bi aninus akravte. Fine, okay, fine. So Amar Mar hayu l'shloshtin shiasrafu. So he said, well, maybe if it's an issue of an oinin to eat these karbanos, then they all should have been burned, not just Sir Rosh Chodesh. So my shloshtan, what are the three? The sanya, which we kind of already discussed, what they were, but here we elaborate further. Sir hachatas, dorish Moshe, sir zu sir nachshain. So this is the special sir of nachshain, which is one of the nesiim that was brought. So Rashi Shoysa Hayom Hayarishan LaHakravas Nesiim. Nachshon ben Aminadav, he was the first of the Nesiim to have brought the karbanos. Each one brought for the each of the days. B'chav Gimel b'Adar Hischil HaMiluyim. There was the Shiva Shemei Miluyim, which got to the 8th day, Yom Hashmini, which was Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So on the 23rd day of Adar, they already each Shevet started bringing karbanos. B'chol Shivas Hayomim Hayu Moshe Maimid Hamishkan Amakrivis Karbanaisav B'chol Boiker. So Moshe, on that week, he actually acted as the Kohen Gadol, as we're going to see. So that's the Sir Nachshon. Chatas Zu Chatas Shmini. This is the Chatas Shmini. It says Rashi Sheba Chayva L'Shah. This was specifically on the 8th day. That was for that time. Kahu Seir Izim Chatos. It was a special carbon only for that time. So when it came to the Sir Nachshon and the Seir of the Chatas Shmini, so that we were lenient to be able to eat. But the Sir Rosh Chodesh, which is Ladaris, had to be burned. Dar Seir Shel Rosh Chodesh, fine. Yochel Shloshim Nisrafu, burn all three. Talmud Lemer V'hini Sarif Echad Nisraf V'loy Shlosh Nisrafu. Only one of them is burned, namely the Sir Rosh Chodesh. Darish Darash Shtei Durisha Yislama. So why does it say like two investigations? What exactly is that coming to allude to? So Malumim Neimachat Zu Nisrafa. Why was this the one that was burned? The Elum Munachais, and those were not. Why were some burned, some not? The Eniodeh Ezu, which one is it? Kishu Aimer Ba'isa, with regard to it, Nois Lachem Lases as Avon Hoeda. Havi Aimer Zesir Shoresh Chodesh. So this pasuk is alluding to the Seir Rosh Chodesh. Let's see this pasuk. It's in its entirety. It says, "Madul chaltem esachatos." Why don't you eat this carbon? B'makam kodesh ki kodesh kadashim he. Ba'isa nasal lechem l'seisas avon oeda is to lift up the avon of the nation. L'chaper lechem ifnei Hashem. So that's referring to the Seir Rosh Chodesh. Why? Says Rashi, because the Seir Rosh Chodesh shemachaper al tumas mikdash v'kedashim. As you saw, Masechtas Shavuos. The very beginning of Masechtas Shavuos, that when it comes to the person who is matama, who's tameh, enter the mikdash or eat something tameh, and there was yediyasai betchila v'soif, or yes, this. So we said that the Seir Rosh Chodesh is machaper for this. So therefore, if we're talking about this pasuk, which is specific that it's going to uplift the avonais of Klal Yisrael, so it must be referring to the Seir Rosh Chodesh, and that was what was in question. That was what was burned. So Shabri Kamrele, Reb Nechemia L'Taimei, according to his reasoning, was very good. Yemer Kachi Shah will pasul behu aninos. That when it comes to Kachi Shah, aninos did not pasul it. So as again, when it comes to the question, if you're an Einin, we made a distinction between Kachi Shah, which was only for that present time, which is the Sir Nachshon and the Chatas Shmini, but when it came to the Sir Rosh Chodesh, no. Okay. Fine. Oimer Mar. Haylo Achla Erev. So he said, well, why didn't they eat it at night? Why did they burn it during the day? So Shaper Kerma was a good question. Because he holds that you couldn't actually burn it even eat it at night, because he holds that even at night you can't eat it as an einin, because that's also the din deraisa. The Barachav, a little Pinchas Hayemahen. Shaper Kerma was a good question. So Savak Rembelezer and Rembelezer Rem Chanina lo niskahin Pinchas ad shahargul Zimri. We know the famous story of Zimri in Kazbi, that he went and intervened, which broke a massive magefa in Klal Yisrael. But it was only there that he was given bris kunas oilam, which is mashma. Before that, he was not a kohen, therefore he could not have partake. So therefore, the only people that were really able, the only kohanim in Be'etzim that existed was Aharon and his two other sons that remained, and they were all in Aninos, because it was either the Aaron's sons that died or brothers, and therefore they were all oinim. So Pinchas, even though he was not an oinin, he wasn't a kohen at that time. Dechsev v'hoisel lazar achara bris kunas oilam. Rav Ashi Omer ad shesam shalom ben shvatim, until he cause peace among the tribes. Shenemar v'yishma Pinchas a Kohen. Here he is called a Kohen. And the Seo Eid of Rashi Alfei Yisrael v'Goymer. So we're looking at Rashi. This is in the days of Yeshua. B'Shevet, first wide line. B'Shevet b'nei Gad u'b'nei Ruvain shebanu mizbeach be'ever hayardin. That Gad and Ruvain, they built the mizbeach on the Transjordan. Ubikshu, because Gad and Ruvain, they were part of the discussion to live on the Transjordan if they fought. That was the whole Tanai Kafel with Moshe. Ubikshu shar shvatim la'alos alehem l'tzava, and the other shvatim wanted to go up with them to war. V'shalchas Pinchas l'daber imohem, and he spoke to them, and everyone was got along. Okay. Why did we say that he became a kohen only later on when he intervened with the shvatim of Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruvain? So, but it also says that right after Cosby, he was given bris kunas oil. Right. So how do we understand that? It wasn't actually given the kahuna yet. It's just a blessing that he was given, and that's basically it. Okay. So that's one answer. So it doesn't mean that was the only time he was a kohen. It's just to give him to mention the yichos. Okay. Now let's look at question 3. It was a long piece. Ma hikshu Rabbi Yehuda Reb Shimon Reb Nechemia. What were the questions? 3 questions that were asked. The Omer Chatas Rosh Chodesh B'Shmini, the Chatas of Rosh Chodesh, of the Sir Rosh Chodesh on the day of the Miluyim. Mipnei Ninus Sarfu. He said that the reason why I was burned is because of a ninus, not because it became tummy, because of a ninus. So, not so simple. So, he first of all said, if the problem is the ninus, so then why did you only burn the Sir Rosh Chodesh? You should burn them all 3. So he said, no, Savar Kachi Shah will possible behem ninus. That there wasn't, when it came to those other 2 karbanos, then it didn't pass on ninus. So all those other 2 were not burned, but only the Sir Rosh Chodesh, which was Ladaris. Another question is Dahayel Lahem La'achla Be'erev, the Aninus Laila Durbanan. Said, why, if it was a whole issue of Aninus, so why didn't they just eat these karbanos at night? He could have eaten the Sir Rosh Chodesh at night. So he says that Aninus actually at night is also Diraisa, and therefore it's not allowed. And then the third question is, if Pinchas, who was with him, so why couldn't he have eaten it? He's not an Oinain. So he said because he wasn't a kohen until either he killed Zimri, until he made peace among the tribes. So is question 3, TA21, same question. Let's see how he's able to write it in just a few words. You should have burned all 3. You could have eaten it at night. Pinchas Hayimahen. Rav Nachman's really Kachi Shah lo Pasal Mehen Aninos. Aninos Laila Deraisa, Velo Niskahin Pinchas Adayan. It's correct, but how could you write it that short? And this is what I wrote. Let's just see. For TB24. Lamalo Saraf Kol HaKarbanos. Hevdel Yesh Baharasha Veloy B'Rosh Chodesh. Okay. Aninus B'Layla Rak Midrabanan. V'hu Savar Kashu Deraisa. Pinchas Yachal Achal Kasher Hu Lo Haya Oinain. Pinchas Adain Lo Haya Zaychel Kahuna. It's pretty good. Okay. All right. So Ramar, Moshe Rabbeinu Kohen Gadol. Moshe Rabbeinu actually, again, during the Shivas Meimulim, served as the Kohen Gadol. The Chaylik B'Kadosh Shemayim Haya, and he was engaged in all the division of all the karbanos. That was his job. He was acting as the Kohen Gadol. Shenemar Me'el Hemuluim L'Moshe Hayilamana. So we see, Taka, that's what he did. That, as Rashi says, Lashon Chaluka B'Kohanim, like he divided among the Kohanim. Of course, let's not forget Moshe was a Levi, right? He wasn't given kahuna, but he came from the descendants of Shevet Levi, right? So he certainly was a Levi. It was only the Aaron was given the blessing of kahuna. Okay, but the Shevet Levi and the Levim and Kohanim all come from Shevet Levi, right? Yisraelim come from all the other Shvatim, so that's why there's so few of these guys. Anyway, so basically, Pinchas says, well, Pinchas, that's the kasha, oh, Pinchas, what Pinchas needed? No, Pinchas wasn't a Kohen yet. So if Moshe Rabbeinu could have asked, why couldn't Moshe have just ate it? So Dilma Shani Moshe did Tarid B'Shechina. So even though it's true he was involved in all these things, he didn't have time to be Isaac and Achilles Kachim. Because of that, he was constantly involved from day and night with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so he didn't have the capacity to sit around and eating karbanos. Not that that's like not an important mitzvah, but he was Torah, so he wasn't shaykh to have taken that role. How do we see that he was Torah? Yomar Moshe Bashkama, at the very beginning of the day, all he got up of Ashkama Yared. So basically it means he, as Rashi says, in the morning he got up, Lahar B'yemei Matan Torah, Kashahi Oyel of Yared, L'Kadesh Es Am, L'Hashiv Es Direi Am El Hashem, Perikurikim Masech Shabbos, Al Matarad. He was very busy. Okay, Meisvei. So the pasuk says, Lechem El Kav Mikodesh Kadashim Umina Kadashim Ye'oichel. So this pasuk, it says, let's see if we can find it. This is the whole pasuk. So what do we see from here? Im Namru Kachi Kadashim or Namru Kadashim Kalam. It says, Lechem El Kav Mikodesh Kadashim Umina Kadashim. So it talks about Kachi Kadashim and then says Kadashim, which is Kadashim Kalam. So why does it mention both? If it mentions Kachi Kadashim, which is a higher level of sanctity, Lam never Kadashim Kalam. The Im never Kadashim Kalam, Lam never Kachi Kadashim. Why does it mention both? Ilu never Kadashim Kalam. If it didn't say that, Hayiso Aimer Kachi Kadashim who the Oichel. Only that he was allowed to eat. Shari Hutru Lazar, because we find there was mutter to Azar, namely to Moshe, says Rashi. So maybe we're leaning by Kach Kadashim because Moshe was able to eat the Chaz v'Shoik. But maybe Kadashim Kalim, Bechor, Meiser, Pesach, whatever, the Chaz v'Shoik of a Shlomim, of a Shalmi Yachid, Rashi says, Chaz v'Shoik shel Shalmi Yachid, Lo Yachol Kim Echav. So maybe that's not allowed to be. Lo yoichel. V'ilu nemer kach kadashim hayiso aimer b'kadashim kalam niya oichel shehem kalam. It's only a lower level of kedusha. B'kach kadashim lo yehei oichel l'kach nemer kadashim kalam. Kach kadashim l'kach nemer kadashim kalam. Getani miyeh. What do we learn? Shahari hutu lazar v'lehen lav Moshe. L'chara we see this is referring to Moshe. So remember that he Taka did eat, right? He said he could have eaten. Remember Sheshus lo B'bama lazar, ukadivri ha'omer yesh mincha b'bama. So what is that? It's referring to a bama, right? When it was a bama is mutter to a zar, and it's like one who says that you could have a mincha on a bama katana. So that's all it's referring to. It's not referring to Moshe Rabbeinu, because Moshe Rabbeinu was too tired to eat. Because if he could eat, then what was this whole problem over here to begin with of Sreifa? Okay, so therefore it must be that he was too tired to eat, but he really was acting as a Kohen Gadol. Question 4. We're going to stop there, actually. Heichin matzinu kachi kadashim nechon lazar. Le'eza shita lo mishkachas la. So possibly Moshe Rabbeinu ate the chazan shaykh of the Miluyim. Omad Yomer Moshe Kohen Gadol haya umishkachas la b'Miluyim. Shari mincha hakrava b'bama katana When it comes to the leftovers of the mincha, you can be makar min bama katana. It's mutter to a zar. Umadir ein mincha babama umishkachas la babama. So then you wouldn't be able to say it's talking about a bama. Okay. Let's see if there's another question around here. No, and presumably no. Not